I'm breaking the fourth wall on this episode. I have been doing a lot of insider episodes, the audio edition of my newsletter, which if you've heard it before, you know it, newsletter.bigpodcast.com. And I feel like I need to break things up a bit. As you know from being a podcaster, that it is easy to get in ruts and it is easy to get overwhelmed with other work when you're doing other things other than podcasting. And that's the issue I've got. I mean, the podcast takes so long to do. I've got other things. I'm working on a new book. I'm working on other projects, client work. I talked about the NPR podcast that I'm doing. Anyway, I'm here. It's Build a Big Podcast, the marketing podcast for podcasters. I am breaking things up a bit. I've got lots of options for various episodes. In fact, I wrote a book on these. It's called 101 Podcast Episode Templates. I'll have a link in the episode notes. You'll see that at podcast.bigpodcast.com, but you can find that at Amazon. You can actually get it for 99 cents at Amazon. So if you're interested, go there and do it. I've got a format here that I love, and this is called over, under, or accurate. Overrated, underrated, or accurate. That's basically what it is. And I'm going to go through 5 things in podcasting. I'm going to talk about them in a different way. If you are in any kind of podcasting group on Facebook or any social media, you know that podcasters have our beliefs about certain things. And I make jokes all the time on Instagram talking about RE20 being the best mic. Blue Yeti sucks. Don't use gamer headsets, whatever. But is that really the truth? And I want to be accurate about what I'm putting out. I think it's fun to have an inside joke, but the reality is the best mic, it's the one you've got. And if that's a Blue Yeti, that's great. So why don't we start there? Blue Yeti, is it overrated, underrated, or accurately rated? And I think that it is overrated for most people, but underrated for podcasters. You can record with it. And as I said, the best mic is the one that you use. And if you know how to use it, you will be fine. The way to use it, turn the gain all the way down, put it on a cardioid pattern, and get very close, what we call 3 fingers, like a Boy Scout salute, probably, 2 inches away from it. You're going to be fine. Is the space quiet? That's going to help because the mic is very sensitive. What I like to do is put the stand on something like a mouse pad, or you could use a piece of a yoga mat. I've got a rubber coaster that's made out of a used tire that somebody gave me. That's perfect. Something that will absorb the shock of the table and any of the vibrations that the mic might pick up. A book works great, actually. Don't just have it on your desk. But when you use it correctly like that, gain all the way down, cardioid pattern, something to absorb some of the vibrations, it's not bad. Now, here's why it's overrated. Is it expensive? Yes. Is it clunky? Yes. Overly sensitive? Yes. You can get a mic like the ATR 2100 by Audio-Technica for $50. Blue Yeti's twice that, maybe a little more than twice that. Not the best mic, but it is a mic. A lot of people have it. As I mentioned, I've got one here. I talk about this so much, I might do a giveaway, like a custom Blue Yeti. I actually drilled a hole in the stand. I've got a metal pop filter on it. That makes it sound even better. Look for that if you're interested. All right, number 2, Audacity. Overrated, underrated, or accurately rated. And I'm going to say that this is way underrated. I've been using Audacity for about 20 years. It is getting better all the time. Plugins on the new version work seamlessly. I use Isotope RX and also VEA, Voice Enhancement Assistant. They work perfectly. The Focusrite plugins work great. This episode actually recorded and edited in Audacity. I think it's amazing. The new version is fast. People say, well, it doesn't have non-destructive editing. Yes, it does. With that said, I think destructive editing, underrated. Make a decision, man. I understand it's nice to have options and go back, but for podcasting, especially an easy monologue or an interview format podcast, make a decision and stick with it. But if you want the non-destructive editing, it's there. Number 2, Audacity, way underrated. Number 3, podcasting conferences. Underrated. Except for the events that are overrated. It's easy to spend a couple grand or more to attend bigger events. Passes sometimes $300, $500. A flight, hotels, and these podcasting conferences, the bigger ones, they're at these really nice hotels because a lot of the people they're trying to attract they're on the company card. $400 a night, not a problem for them. $500, $600 pass, not a problem for them. Flight wherever, not a problem for them. For you as an independent podcaster, maybe so. You're making the money. You're living and dying by your own decisions. Now, $2,000, if I could go somewhere and have a great experience, is it worth it? Yeah, probably. But would you have a great experience at a larger event? This is why I think that these things are underrated until they're overrated. The bigger events, overrated because they're easy to get lost at. It's easy to come away from a big podcasting event with nothing. If you don't go in there with a plan, because everybody's already setting themselves up for events, because everybody's already setting up meetings, all these company ad tech people that are just hanging out at the bar, they don't care. It's like spring break to them. Whatever. We're out of the office. Company dime. Let's go party. I was in the music business a long time, as you might know. And we've got an event called South by Southwest. And South by Southwest, just to be clear, there are actually 3 events. There's an interactive one, there's film and TV, and there's music. It started as music. When you hear people in podcasting say South by Southwest, they're usually talking about interactive, but interactive is relatively new compared to the music portion. Music portion started in the 90s. I first went there in 98. I've been there probably, 15 times. It is spring break for the music industry. And there are people that will go there, check into the Four Seasons Hotel, and not leave. It is alcohol, it is drugs, it is hookers. Some of these podcasting events, look, I'm not going to kink shame, I'm not going to make judgment. But when you've got these big companies involved, they're on the company dime. If you're an independent podcaster, 1, do you really need to see those people? And 2, if those folks are on the company dime, are they interested in seeing you? Are they even there? That's why I'm saying some of these events are overrated. However, in general, I think getting together with other podcasters, way underrated. It's easy for us to look at the big business of podcasting and think because of the big booths that you're seeing and the big parties that are at these big events, we're not important, but we are important. We are the guys that are driving the industry. Without the creatives, the hosts, the guys that are taking the chances on new technology and driving the thing forward, those guys with the bigger companies and the bigger investments, they've got nothing to grab onto. They're not the innovators. We're the innovators. So in that case, if you can connect with the people who are also innovating and also creating just like you, yeah, it's great. I would suggest for most people, smaller podcasting events. There was a recent podcasting event that this has happened more than once. After every big podcasting event, people will approach me because I used to own a big music conference, actually second in size to South by Southwest. And I've got people that come to me kind of jokingly, but not like, you want to get back in that space? And I'm actually thinking about it now. What if we put together some small, and I'm talking about regional events, 100 or so people that could really connect podcasters with each other. I think those are underrated. I've already done a couple of them. And we can keep the cost down so it's affordable for independent podcasters. We can keep the content and the connections very high. These are events that are made for independent podcasters. So I'm thinking about it. If you're interested, you think, Dave, yeah, that's a great idea, or no, don't do it. Reach out to me, bigpodcast.com. That's the way to get in touch. A lot of independent podcasters, by the way, and I think this is a mistake, they talk about, I can learn this stuff online, or I can learn this stuff from a book. Yeah, I wrote a book. I hope you do learn it from a book. And I've got some online stuff like this podcast. I hope you are learning stuff online. But when it comes to connecting with people and seeing the in the trenches people that are working, maybe like me, I'm right now in the 5x8 closet all by myself. If I didn't put this thing out eventually and you heard it, you wouldn't know that it exists. And there are a lot of people in a lot of different niches that you have no idea that they exist because you are not in that niche. They are not marketing to you. Those are the people you see at podcasting conferences. And those are the kind of people that I like to bring into these smaller events and have people like you, because you're also doing something that's interesting and they don't know about, get connected with those people. Everybody gets connected with each other. It's also motivating, especially if it's a regional event. The couple of events that I did were in Nashville, and it's very cool. We had some guys come up from Atlanta, Memphis, Knoxville, in the surrounding area. You can get together with those people a lot easier than if you're in Washington State and you meet somebody from Texas at a national event. Regional events, local events, that is where I think that it's at. Those are things that I think are way underrated. So for that, podcasting events, let's call it accurately rated. Some of them way underrated. Some of the bigger events, way overrated. Number 4, high-end mics. I'm talking into one right now. As I mentioned, the RE20, it's about $450 right now. You got a shock mount, it's about $100. The pop filter, I don't know, $40, $50. It's easy to spend $500 or $600. And yes, I'm aware that it gets a lot more high-end than this, but not usually for broadcasting, what we do as podcasters. I would say high-end mics, and I'm talking RE20, SM7B, overrated for general use. Meaning that if you're a podcaster, RE20 or SM7B, they're probably not going to do a lot for your podcast or for the listeners. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment talking into a pro mic? Yeah, you might. I think where they're underrated is reliability, especially if you're doing any kind of interview remotely. And that is not just a high-end mic. That is the brand name mics. An example of this, not high-end, but a brand name, the Shure SM58. And a funny story about the SM58, I needed a couple of them for a project. I had one that I bought through an authorized dealer, which was Amazon. And I had another that I got off eBay because Amazon wasn't able to deliver quickly to me. eBay is like, yep, I'll get it to you the next day. I said, great. So I get on eBay, save myself $10, $89 instead of $99. And I've got it delivered the next day. This thing's delivered via UPS, looks great. I'm like, wow, this is a great mic. And I saved myself $10 and I got it the next day. The next day, Amazon delivers the other mic. And it was at that time that I realized the one from the authorized dealer, Amazon, was different from the one that I got from eBay. And I have been using these mics for years. 30 years I've used SM58s. Everybody in the music industry has used them. They are in every club across the United States, every club across the world. They're selling millions of them a year. Every comedy club. It is a great mic. Even I didn't recognize what was happening. It's a counterfeit. Here's the deal. I'm not going to get into the judgment of, oh, you're ripping people off by counterfeiting brands, whatever. Yeah, you are. But here's why it matters to you. Because I know people that think, oh, man, if I can save money on a counterfeit mic or a low-end mic, it doesn't even have to be counterfeit. It could be some kind of no-name brand. I'm saving myself money. This is what is underrated, the reliability. You only have one opportunity to capture a moment on tape. If there's a problem, maybe you can get the same person back, but it is never the same. And if a mic fails on you, was it worth $10 that you saved? No, not worth the risk. $50, $100, more than that, not worth the risk. You're paying for reliability. You're also paying for something that sounds good. Technology has come down. Manufacturing is pretty amazing right now, but I would 100% invest in quality mics for yourself, especially if you're doing remote interviews, especially if you're doing any interview. But it could be just you. Your stuff's important too. Yeah, you can replicate it. Maybe easier than getting a guest back or having that moment with a guest. You're a professional. You know how to act. Do it one more time. Make it seem like the first time, but other people aren't going to be able to do that for you. So that aspect, reliability, underrated, high-end mics. Spend money on a good mic. Spend money on equipment that your message is deserving of, and the people whom you interview are deserving of. That's not just hardware, that's software. Help others to get their messages out. Number 5, remote recording. I'm talking about Riverside or Zoom. I would say that this is accurately rated. There's nothing like getting in the same room with people. First of all, it is a different experience for the guest. If you've got a guest that's doing a lot of remote interviews, that guest's experience is more or less the same thing. That person's going to go to his computer, studio, wherever, talk in the same mic, look at the same computer screen, listen through the same headphones. It's more or less the same experience. If somebody comes to you, that person has a different experience. Where I record my radio show, we are in an old car factory. Imagine Model T looking cars. It's called Marathon. freight elevator, wood, high ceilings, big glass windows. It is very cool. When people come to us, it is an experience. They remember it. Depending on who they are, they've never been in a radio studio before. But a lot of these radio studios, corporate, been to the Sirius XM headquarters in New York. Got about 3 floors of this one building on Avenue of Americas. It's like going into NASA. It is cool as hell. We're not going to compete with that, but we're not competing with that because we've got an old car factory. Also cool as hell. Your place, this 5x8 room, I've had people in here before. Cool as hell. It's memorable, a lot more memorable than Zoom. So in that case, I think it's helpful. It's memorable. It's also helpful to have an experience with somebody right there next to you. Music Business Radio, as I mentioned, I interview a lot of musicians. Those musicians play for me, an audience of 3. Me, the engineer, the producer. Richard Marx, Dave Stewart from Eurythmics, the Doobie Brothers. More or less private concerts. And it is cool, man. Maybe cooler for me than them. But it's a different experience. I've had guys come in. Jeffrey Steele was one of them. Well-known songwriter. You probably never heard that name, but you've heard of Rascal Flatts. He wrote a song called Me and My Gang. He wrote a lot of the Flatts stuff, actually. I was never a Rascal Flatts fan. This dude comes in. I'm like, this song was awesome because I'm hearing his version of it. It's a different experience. So you've got a good experience. The guest has a good experience. Jeffrey, because he came to me, I see him out. Hey, man, how's it going? You know, we know each other now. I don't know that that would have happened if we were just on Zoom or if we're just on something like Zencaster or Clean Feed, something that's audio only. It's also cheaper than it used to be. Back in the day, we did this via ISDN. Very expensive. You had to find a studio that had ISDN. Radio stations had it. Voiceover studios would have it. Some standard recording studios would have it, but it's pricey. You didn't know how to set it up. I've done it several times. I have to have an engineer do it for me. I don't know. We get some tones and all right, somebody's calling in. And we have it planned and we're ready there for them. But I wouldn't even know how to pick up on it. Riverside, Zoom, Clean Feed, I know how to pick up. I know how to connect. So that's very cool. Also, a huge time saver. I did an interview with Dolly Parton via Zoom. It's a press junket. You know, I've got 15 minutes with her. Strangely enough, she's right down the street. I can walk to her office. And let's say she was there that day. No way could she come to me or I go to her in the time it took me to connect with her and have her on to the next interview. 15 minutes, that was it. You're connected to Dolly. Okay, go. The moment she comes in, you're go, 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 go. There's no small talk. You can actually hear that episode. I've got it in the feed. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, bigpodcast.com/subscribe. That will get you set up. Just search for Dolly and Build a Big Podcast. You will hear it. You will hear the before of me waiting to connect to that interview. I was nervous. You hear the raw tape of that interview. And you hear the conversation that I had with my producer afterwards. You couldn't do that with a standard interview. And strangely enough, now that one was memorable for me because we did that via Zoom. And Zoom is one of those things where, you know, you're talking to your sister, your brother, parents. Hey, Uncle Joe, what's up? Family stuff, you know, or maybe office stuff. And that was different because it's like, all right, we're connecting. Boop. Dolly Parton shows up in rock star attire. Kind of looked like an Evel Knievel kind of thing. Red, white, and blue. Very fancy. Guitars behind her, lit up, big hair. Great. You just don't see that on Zoom. So that can stand out, but nothing like standing out in person. When you've got a guest that walks in your studio, that guest is having a great experience, at least a memorable experience, and you are having a memorable experience. That's it for this episode. I'm going to keep this up. I'm going to keep doing some overrated, underrated episodes. I've got some other things I'm going to be going through, talking about the different aspects of things that we hear about and maybe don't think about them in the full way that we should. It's easy to write something off like the Yeti, like Audacity, like expensive mics, like video. But there's a reason that people are using this stuff. On the other hand, it's easy to think, oh yeah, an RE20, that's all I need to sound great. No. Do you really need it? No. Maybe there's some other ways for you to sound great. So I'm going to go deeper into these elements as I go through them one by one by one. If you want to make sure that you don't miss these over, under, or accurate episodes, go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. Subscribe to Build a Big Podcast. I've got 3 buttons for you, one for Android, one for iPhone, one is an RSS feed. That will make sure that every episode that I do, overrated, underrated, or accurately rated episodes, the newsletter episodes, and all the other episodes that I've got for you, all of them about building your podcast, growing a bigger audience, making a podcast that matter, that you never miss them. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe to do that. Go there now before you forget, and I'll see you on the next episode of Build a Big Podcast.